FLIPSIDE is one show that seeks to put a balance to issues, by taking a look at them from different perspectives. They say variety is the spice of life. So one of the beauties of life is, seeing things from different angles, else it becomes boring. My name is Harry Aigboje, and of course, I'm glad to be back here doing what I love to do best. Now today we're taking a look at a very, very pressing issue. Pressing in the sense that it affects every single one of us, irrespective of class, age, status, race, or whatever. As long as you're human, it definitely affects you. It's something that has to do with our environment. So today we're taking a look at global warming and climate change, the long-term impact on humanity. Yes, whether you like it or not, this affects you. And of course, to take a look at this very interesting topic with me is a senior colleague who also happens to be an environmentalist. He's a professional in this field. He goes by the name of Dr. Sonny Duke Okoson. It's good to have you in the house, sir.
It's a pleasure, Harry, to be with you and to talk about environmental issues, which is something that I love to talk about, and I also love to advocate on and drive so that our people can become more environmentally conscious. When we are environmentally conscious, we can take actions for preservation, conservation, and protection.
Absolutely. It's indeed a pleasure and an honor to have you in the house on FLIPSIDE today. Okay, let's get started, sir. First question. What is global warming? Let's begin to examine the, concepts.
Okay, I will take global warming and climate change together because they always go together.
Okay.
But before that, let's even set the tone for the conversation. When you look at the earth, you look at the environment in its pristine state, that is in its natural state, it's very beautiful, it's very colorful. I mean, if you are a village boy like me, and you go to the village, you probably go to the farm, I mean, you just love the scenery, the sound of birds and the cover of trees and all of that. In that state, environment is lovely. Why are we talking about climate change, global warming today? Is the result of pollution. The industrial age brought all of this into the fore, because with the industrial age, we started having internal combustion engines and all of those developmental efforts. And in most cases, when man attempts to improve himself, improve his environment, improve the quality of life, it brings about technological interventions. It brings about innovation. And in doing that, you will always impact on the environment to get a product that will improve and impact on humanity. Now, from that product, there's always a waste. And that waste is left in the environment with attendant consequences. That's how this environmental pollution has been, whether it is land, whether it is air, whether it is water, and several others. And at the end of the day, the environment suffers. Human health suffers. And that's the substance that we're looking at today. What is global warming? Global warming is a result of the emission of greenhouse gases into the environment.
What are greenhouse gases?
Greenhouse gases are gases that are usually released into the environment, and they contribute to global warming. Greenhouse gases, you have carbon dioxide, you have methane, you have some refrigeration chemicals. They are derivatives of fluoride. You have the hydrofluorocarbons, you have the perfluorocarbons, you have the sulfur hydrocarbons. Now, all of these compounds, even though they have uses in being used as refrigerants, in refrigerators, air conditioners, they also find themselves in the atmosphere. You even have ozone too. So these are greenhouse gases. They are called greenhouse gases because they produce what we call greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effect is like trapping heat. All right? The earth is, is in such a way that it's able to regulate itself. But these gases do not allow the heat to go into the atmosphere. It traps it. And because it is trapped, it now brings about unusual changes in the weather conditions, in the temperature, precipitation, humidity of the atmosphere. So you see changes in the climate, you see changes in temperature, you see changes in relative humidity, and these changes come with attendant consequences. And that's what you're seeing today in our environment.
Okay, let's take a more critical look at global warming.
Yes.
How would you describe that? Global warming in itself, away from climate change now. When you say the atmosphere is getting warmed up,
yes.
What exactly in practical terms does that mean?
I just explained that to you. When you talk about global warming is the unusual changes in the heat of the atmosphere, which is the result of the effect of greenhouse gases. Let me give you a typical example. In some laboratory experiments, you can produce something like a greenhouse, which consists of basically a glass container, and then of course that glass container will not allow heat to leave that environment, and then you plant crop inside. The essence is to be able to see how the plant will behave in such an environment. Now, with that glass, heat cannot go out. All right. So that's just the typical example of how the greenhouse gas effect works. So when these gases are in the atmosphere, they do not allow the heat to go out of the atmosphere in such a way and manner that they are trapped. And because of that entrapment, the atmosphere becomes hotter.
Tensed.
Becomes hotter. The temperature increases. And it affects other, weather factors. That's what we're talking about.
How do scientists measure climate change?
Well, there are various ways scientists measure climate change. You can measure climate change by monitoring the temperature variations in the atmosphere. You can also measure it by using satellite to map out these concentrations in different parts of the atmosphere and create a database to be able to monitor the trends and pattern of the temperature ranges, and that will give you insight into the situation with climate change as it relates to a particular location or on a global scale.
Now to the average person out there, to the layman, how, what evidences actually show that the climate is changing?
There are a lot of evidence there. I mean, they are staring at us in our faces today. Backstage, before we came on there, we're just interacting. And I said, today, you find changes in weather patterns. We have what we know as the August break, which means in August, for about a week or 2 weeks, there won't be any rain. Sometimes August break can actually become September break, or can even become May break, which means what we are used to, they are changing as a result of the impact and effect of these GHGs. We'd call them GHGs, that's the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, the refrigerants that I mentioned earlier, and even ozone. So all of these are responsible for these variations that you see. So what is the result? We are seeing unusual flooding. We are seeing erosion. I mean, you heard about the incident that happened in Mokwa, in Niger State recently, where over 200 people died. These are the results of climate change and global warming, because it brings about the melting of the polar ice caps. As a result of this unusual heat, some of these cold regions where you have ice, they are melting. And when they melt, they go back into the seas. And as a result, you have seas rising. And the end result is some of these agricultural and environmental issues that we see around the world.
Now, back in the day, there used to be specific time frames for, weather changes. For example, I think from September, you begin to experience coldness, the Harmattan season. You begin to see signs of the Harmattan season. But nowadays, you see situations where even in December, we are still anticipating Harmattan. Could that also be part of the...
Those are the issues we're talking about. It's part of the things we're talking about as it relates to weather changes. Climate change, weather is climate. Global warming is impacting on climate, bringing about changes in the climate. Like some of the things you talked about. You see fluctuation in temperature, fluctuation in weather, some of the things that we're used to before. We see them happening, but not at the time that we know them to happen, or the time they're supposed to happen. So this is the reality of what climate change and global warming is. But the interesting thing is that there's a scientific component of this conversation that we can see, that we can measure. But there is also the political
Okay.
And the globalist part of the conversation, maybe in the course of the program we're talking
hopefully,
about that.
Hopefully. Here's a very critical question. I think this one is more professional. How reliable are climate models in predicting future changes?
Yeah, they are very reliable because they help us to assess where we are now based on data, which means they are empirical. They are not just things you conjure up.
Okay.
And then you're able to now extrapolate them based on the data that is available to now make projections into the future, whether it is computer-based or whatever model that you decide to adopt. They are very reliable because you make those projections based on what is available. They are not things you conjure. Okay. Otherwise, it becomes unscientific.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. How do ice cores and tree rings provide information about past climates?
Oh, very, very fantastic. Some of these ice cores and tree rings, they've been there for years, and they store information about the environment where they exist,
okay,
whether it's the temperature or the precipitation. So for a researcher can leverage on these ice cores and tree rings to be able to extract information about the climate condition, about that environment. Okay. That helps you to know the impact of climate change or global warming on those areas. So they are very, very reliable.
Okay, in case you're just joining us, it's Flipside on independent television, and we're taking a look at global warming and, of course, climate change and the impact on humanity. We shall be going on this break, and when we return, the program continues. Please stay tuned. Right, it's great to have you back, ladies and gentlemen. In case you're just joining us, it is Flipside on independent television, and we're taking a look at global warming and climate change, the long-term impact on humanity. And of course, I've got Dr. Sonny Duke Okosun in the house with me. So, just before we went on that break, we were talking about the various factors responsible for climate change. Now, let's examine that more thoroughly. What are the various factors, and how important are these factors?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that some of these gases that are responsible for climate change and global warming, which we've talked about, naturally they occur. Like you and I, as human beings, we take in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Yeah. Well, carbon dioxide is also a greenhouse gas. And then methane, from some microbial decomposition of plants and all of that, methane can be produced. And then from even crude oil deposits in the soil, methane can also be produced. And then, except for maybe some of the fluorocarbons used for refrigeration. And then ozone exists naturally in the atmosphere. Particularly at the stratospheric level. But what is the problem coming from? The problem is coming from man-made activities, which you call the anthropogenic activities. As I said before, man in his quest to live better, live bigger, live happier, is into one production or the other. And in the process, these gases come into the atmosphere.
So industrialization?
Yes, industrialization, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. And then you have natural sources, like bush burning. Back here, you want bush meat, you go to a forest, you set it ablaze. In the course of that combustion that is taking place, these gases are emitted into the atmosphere. Now, industrialization is the major culprit for these gases coming into the atmosphere. Industrialization, for example, the oil and gas industry, yeah, right? Manufacturing companies, all of these are activities that brings these gases into the atmosphere. So if we want to checkmate them, we must be able to put into place practices, policies, laws that will guide the emission of these gases into the atmosphere. Interestingly, some of these laws are in place, but are they being implemented? Okay. Are they being followed up? Are companies being held accountable around Edo State, around Benin City, and across Nigeria? These factories that are into production, into manufacturing, what is their environmental impact assessment report, okay, in terms of how they treat the environment? I remember in my undergraduate days, my focus was on effluents from rubber factories, right? And then effluent from rubber factory, then effluent from palm oil factories. We take the wastewater from this factory, took them to the lab, and then characterize them, and then purify them to come to that stage where you can drink it. what was the idea? The idea is to be able to recycle the water. So this is exactly what we're talking about. In some of these companies, we're just after producing the product without looking at the environmental impact and the implications of that production. So that's the crux of the matter.
Okay, now let's look at the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, the IPCC. What role does it play in all of this?
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is an international body that was formed by the effort of the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and the International Organization on Meteorology. The idea for that organization was to provide a policy thrust and direction in guiding how we respond to climate change and global warming. The 1.5 degrees Celsius, which form part of the Paris Agreement, came from them. So when we have, with those kind of policies, we now know where we are, okay, where we are coming from, where we are, and where we are going. And they've been doing a great job to see how we can bring the right policies in place to drive the conversation, drive policies as it relates to climate change and global warming.
Okay, you talked about the need for regulation and implementation.
Yes.
Whose role is this in the scheme of things?
Well, it's a collective responsibility. Environment, you know, is our life. It provides for everybody, whether you are low, whether you are in the middle class, whether you're in the upper class. We all benefit from the environment. So it's a collective responsibility as an individual. Okay, for example, if you drive around, most people, what they do, they have refuse, they have waste, they have wood, they have plastics, they have all of those things they've condemned in their houses. At certain time, cellophane, at certain times of the day, they bring all these things outside and they set it ablaze. What are they doing? They want to reduce the mass of that waste. But they forget that in the course of reducing the mass of that waste, you are polluting the environment. Oh. Yeah, you are polluting the environment. So we must have a very effective, efficient waste disposal mechanism. But it's gone beyond that. It's gone beyond waste collection and disposal. It's waste management. Waste management is beyond just collecting the waste and disposing them. No. We begin the management from the home, from your house. You have a waste collection bin. Segregate the waste. You have solid, you have liquid. Your solid could be a bar. Then you have the degradable and the non-biodegradable. Degradable, they can be decomposed within a short period of time through the microbial action. You have your food, you have your soup, and all of those. You separate them. Okay. You have the non-biodegradable, mostly solid, like plastics and all of that. Separate them so that when the waste collector comes, it takes those waste in a separated form. And you know that in that form, they can be taken back to the factory for recycling. Okay. This year's World Environment Day focused on no plastic. Why? Because of the impact of plastic pollution on human health and on the environment. Can you imagine that within the oceans and the seas, within the grills of fishes, you find plastic particles? How did they get there? Through pollution. I mean, if it rains in Benin City, for example, and you drive around, you'll be shocked that on top of the flood water, you find plastics. Why? Because you and I, after drinking a can of soft drink or water, what do we do to the can? We throw it off. And when you throw it off, where does it end up? It ends up in the gutters. What happens to the gutter? It is blocked. And when the gutter is blocked, what happened? There is flooding. Yeah. And when there is flooding, your house gets flooded. And then you call on government, come to my rescue. My area is... So these are some of the practices that is harming the environment. Now you look at that celebration of the World Environment Day focusing on plastic. Plastic pollution has serious and very severe implications because it can lead to cancer. It can lead to cognitive impairment. It can lead to breast cancer, lung cancer, and all other cancer. It can lead to respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, especially in particulate form. In particulate form, small sizes, okay, where they get stuck in your lungs and then they create hazard. That's why we should stop, people from burning refuse and waste indiscriminately.
Okay.
Because in the course of doing that, this is the consequence. And then you find people who burn tires. For whatever reason, they burn tires. I think there was a time ago, some of these butchers would use tire to roast meat. Today they don't use that. They use gas to roast meat. That's harmful because of the content of gas. Because these combustion activities can bring about some other chemical substances that will be injurious to us.
Okay.
I saw a video recently where the guy that was talking advised against multiple use of palm oil. Use oil, not just palm oil, use oil after using the oil to fry your meat, then or fry your plantain, use it to fry meat and do all of those stuff. Then you keep it. When you have need to fry things again, you bring that same oil out to do all of this.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You are concentrating the amount of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, in that oil. And PAHs are known to be carcinogenic, which means they cause cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer. I mean, if you see what's happening in our world today, the rate of cancer has increased. Do we know the sources? Yes, we know this. And those are the sources we are sharing with you so that we can have some more responsible habits that will make the environment cleaner, and then we can live healthily. When you say you are doing it, it not concern you. When it comes to you, that's when you will know it. So these are some of the things that we need to check.
This is indeed scary, and I'm hoping that...
No, it's not to scare. It's to create the awareness. Because when you are informed, you will not be deformed.
Okay, and I'm hoping that as many persons as are involved in these injurious habits out there, take a cue from what you've said so far, yeah, and try to do better. Now, here's the question that I would love to ask. Is there any relationship between climate change and natural hazards? Because if you take a look around you today, especially in several other parts of the world, you'd see natural hazards like earthquakes, hurricanes, and the rest of them. Does this have anything to do with climate change?
Natural hazards like volcanic eruption, earthquake, is not the direct result of climate change.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not the direct result of global warming.
Are they just natural?
They are natural. They naturally occur. But you also have the influence of industrial activities. If you look at the science behind volcanic eruption, what happens is that the earth crust is molten. That's what you call molten magma, which is floating underneath the earth and is in liquid form and is always looking for a crevice or a crack to pour out. And when it's able to get a point of least resistance, it pours out naturally. And in pouring out, some of these, gases that we talked about, are emitted, which will also impact on their concentrations in the environment, and then ultimately could impact on climate change, impact on, global warming. So that's the linkage between some of these things. And then some countries that are industrialized, a lot of things that they do underground could also lead to some of these natural disasters like earthquake. But there are some countries that are in the plains of these natural disasters like earthquake and volcanic eruptions. I'm not sure in Nigeria there's ever been any earthquake or a volcanic eruption. But that's not to say that a volcano could be active or dormant.
Okay.
Active means that from time to time, like we have in Malaysia and several other countries, it pours out. Dormant means that it is there, it exists, but the people in that region, they are just waiting that, they are praying that one day it's never active.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, how does, apart from cancer, you made mention of cancer a moment ago, are there other, health challenges, serious health challenges that are caused by climate change and, global warming, apart from cancer?
Okay. Well, when I mentioned cancer, I mentioned some of the chemical compounds that are specifically responsible.
Yeah.
But here is I also talked about cognitive impairment, all right? I also talked about the consequence on our immunity, all right? And then, of course, all of these put together are the direct consequences of some of these, chemical substances that you have in the environment. For carbon dioxide, for methane, for ozone, for the CFCs, majorly their impact is on the environment. But because of the impact that they have on the environment, you have human health being affected. If you have changes in weather conditions, if you have unusual heat leading to melting of the polar ice caps and all of that, you have sea rise, and you have flooding. And when you have flooding like we had in Mokwa, what happened? People die. You see how some of these things occur. And then you also have strong implications for agriculture, conflicts. Now, it's very easy for people to condemn some of the actions of these headers that we see today. I also condemn it. Okay. But a major influence on that is desertification, because you have changes in weather patterns. Places that used to be very lush and green with great vegetation, they are no longer existing. And then the water bodies that are supposed to provide water for these cows, they're also drying up. In an attempt to have means to feed their cows and do all, they move down south. Okay. And as they move down south, they come with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay. And that's what we're seeing today. So to checkmate that, we must be deliberate in our policies. Okay. Yeah, in the south is lush, there's water. Why don't you produce the grasses here and send them down north for them to feed their cows, to stop them moving this way?
I'm afraid I'll have to stop you there for now. Thank you. Because we have to go on this very, very important break. And when we return, Flipside continues. Please stay tuned. Yeah, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In case you're just joining us, it is Flipside on independent television. And today we're taking a look at global warming and climate change, the long-term impact on humanity. Now, sir, as interesting and as natural as all of what you've said so far is, it's interesting to know that there's also a political angle to it. Yeah. Isn't that intriguing?
Yeah, well, if you say so, you will be correct. Why this part of the conversation is important, so we can have a proper balance of the issues. When we talk about global warming based on the impact of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, and the resultant effects being climate change and all the other effects that we talk about, when we don't look at the political part of it, then of course we will not situate the issues properly. No doubt that there is the impact of these gases we're talking about. But when you look at some of the recommendations or the policies or ideology in trying to drive how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, very crazy. Very crazy, because we know that if you plant trees, right, you can checkmate the emission of carbon dioxide. Why? Carbon dioxide is an ingredient necessary for photosynthesis. For that to happen, you have carbon dioxide, you have sunlight, you have water, all right? And then, of course, you produce, photosynthesis would take place. Which means if you want to really take care of the reduction of the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, plant more trees. Plant more trees. Everybody should be involved in planting more trees. That will help to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Deploy more friendly, environmentally friendly manufacturing processes to reduce the emissions of these gases into the atmosphere. You can also adopt renewable energy, clean energy, like solar, wind, and the rest of them. It will reduce the amount of pollution. But those who are politicizing this, who have an agenda to drive, they are saying that, well, if we want to, do justice to reducing climate change and global warming by reducing greenhouse gases, we also need to look at the issue of population reduction. And that takes me to the COVID, that has become a major talking point. Yeah. You and I remember what happened during COVID. Someone like Bill Gates, in one of his TEDx presentation, gave a formula to bring us to net zero. Net zero means that we have a structure, a system such that the amount of carbon dioxide emitted is also being removed. So at the end of the day, you don't have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Okay.
But it's not only carbon dioxide that is creating greenhouse gas. So why the focus of carbon dioxide? He put out a formula, CO2 equals S times E times C.
That's a scientific equation.
Is a scientific equation.
Okay.
In other words, the amount of CO2, which is carbon dioxide that you have in the atmosphere, equals the amount of CO2 generated based on the different services or the different activities. And then you multiply that by the amount of energy generated by the different activities. Then you now multiply that by the carbon equivalent of that activity that you carry out. And then he came back to look at that equation to say P stands for people, and people represent population. And then if we really do a great job in managing population through vaccines and all of those health policies, will reduce the amount of CO2 emission. What is COVID-19? COVID simply means certificate of identification. The 19 then means 1 and 9, because 1 is A. Are you following what I'm saying? So this is the reality. This is
some persons have argued that the 19 stands for the fact that it started in 2019 and the end in 2020.
But when you look at what those numbers represent,
okay,
this is fact.
Basically,
this is out there, because you look at COVID-19. When there are a lot of people some people who took COVID-19 today, they are no more. There are a lot of complications that came with the vaccine, right? And nobody is talking about them. Nobody is. So now they hide under the guise of climate change and global warming to drive an agenda of population control. Today, they tell you that, we shouldn't be eating meat, grown like we're growing animals and all. We shouldn't be eating those kind of meat. We can create meat. We can genetically create meat. And they are genetically creating meat, genetically modified organisms,
like factory-made,
genetically made foods like meat. They cut off a human flesh, put it in the laboratory, engineer it multiplies itself at high temperatures and starts coming out as meat. And they use it to do all kinds of things, burgers, shawarma and stuff like that. People are eating. Yeah, people don't. So these are the realities. Now, God created heavens and the earth. After his creation, God looked at what he has created and he said it was good. And God has created the earth in such a way and manner that the earth can replenish itself, can reproduce itself. But we have to use it in a very, very sensible manner. So when you look at some of these agendas, it doesn't make sense. When you have beef all over the place, you have cows all over the place, and then you notice that there is an attempt to stifle the agricultural sector, right? Today, farmers can't go to farm in Nigeria. There's a challenge of cattle rustling. In the north, Benue State is known as the food basket of the nation. Find out how much food are they producing today, because they can't go to the farm.
But some persons would attribute that to insecurity in those regions.
Who is fueling insecurity? The insecurity just wake up and say, insecurity just killing me. No. People are sponsoring it. People are funding those guys who are carrying guns, killing people every day, drive them away from the farm so that the food will not be available. In different parts of the climate, different parts of the world, they are buying up massive lands. They are saying that, we can grow this food scientifically, using engineering mechanisms, and then provide them for people to eat. And many of these food are not healthy for human consumption, but people don't know, and maybe people don't even care to know.
You're talking genetically produced foods.
Yes. Today we have GMO foods. Some of the foods that you buy off the counter and all of that, they are genetically produced. Now, I saw a video some time ago. This is not AI-produced video. It was just a slice of tomatoes that was placed in water. It was swimming. You cut a slice of tomatoes, put it inside water, it's swimming. The animals that we know swim, they are amphibious, fish and all of that. Yeah. So for me, that may have been the product of a genetically produced tomatoes.
Wow.
Because they can actually take the cells of a plant and that of an animal and merge it together to produce a crop without you knowing. And if you take an apple, for example, and then you cut it, within splits of seconds, it starts decaying. If you take yam, with this you cut it, with this it starts decaying. So the natural ways of producing food crops that we always know, they are no longer there, because what we see now, they've been genetically modified. Now here is the danger. Many of these crops that you see, they give you seed. They tell you, oh, their seedlings are better, they are more productive. These seeds, they have high yields, and the farmers get food. They get this seed, then they bring those seeds free of charge, which means you don't pay for them, you don't buy them. So you take those seeds, you plant them. They will grow up. But you know what is painful about those seeds? Those seeds only produce what you will harvest. And after harvest, that's it. When you want to plant next season, you go and buy the seeds again. So if the seeds are not available for you to buy, whatever they tell you to do, you will do. So it's about control. It's about population, about the population. Now, as a village boy, going to farm back in the days, you know that when you plant your yam, when the yam has matured, between August, September, you harvest the yam. Then you leave the head of the yam in the soil. By October, November, you will come back. That yam will produce the yam seedling that you plant for next season. That's what we knew. Even when you plant maize, it's still the same process. For the maize, you know the ones that you will leave, that you come and harvest when they've dried up for next season's planting. But these guys are saying, no. That yam that you planted, after harvesting, the yam should not produce any seedling for you. When you are ready to plant seedlings, we will give you the seedlings to plant. You plant the seedlings, just harvest, and that's where it ends.
And that still boils down to control.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. So this is the agenda that is hardly talked about as it relates to climate change and global warming. Until we all come to that knowledge and take action to resist some of these things, we're in for a showdown.
Now, what actions do you think we could possibly take? We as, common men, normal people living our daily lives, what role, what efforts do you think we could possibly make in trying to mitigate, all of this?
Well, government has to be very much involved. But, in this part of the world, there's always compromise. There's always bribery and corruption. And that seems to be a major challenge. Government has to take a stand with the people and resist some of these things we're talking about. If there are already existing agricultural practices that are beneficial to the people, where we can produce healthy foods, let's encourage them. Okay. Let's support them. And as individuals, they ask you to come and take seedlings free of charge. Ask questions. Ask questions so that you do not nicodemously support what may become injurious to you, your family, and to the larger society within a short period of time. And that's the reality. Yeah.
All right, in case you're just joining us, it's Flipside on independent television, and we're still talking global warming and climate change, the long-term impact on humanity. We shall be going on one final break, and when we return, we'll begin to wrap things up. Don't go nowhere. All right, welcome to the final lap of the program. It's still Flipside on independent television, and we're taking a look at global warming and climate change, the long-term impact on humanity. Now, the question I would like to ask next is, what are the economic effects or the economic consequences of global warming and climate change?
I think they are all staring at our faces. If you look at it from the the impact that it's currently having on agriculture. It's glaring how climate change and global warming is affecting our lives. I mean, the challenge of flooding and erosion, where we have farmlands destroyed, that results to huge economic losses.
Losses, okay.
And then, of course, even houses destroyed, human life destroyed. Those are huge economic losses. And then you also talk about the challenge of desertification, because when you have water bodies drying over, there's not enough water. You have, places that used to be green becoming desert. What you have is that crops will die, animals will die, and then you're seeing this migration crisis that you're seeing in Nigeria and different parts of the sub-Saharan Africa. So these are some of the huge challenges associated economically with climate change and global warming.
Okay, now how are vulnerable communities and developing nations affected by global warming?
Yeah, they are seriously affected because they do not have the funds and the capacity to mitigate them. Mitigation means you're talking about reducing them.
Yeah.
And so that makes them, more vulnerable, and they feel the greater impact of climate change and global warming. But if we have resilient policies in place by government to checkmate, some of these things we're talking about, it will help them to adapt and adjust, and then create that enabling environment. In some countries, you have instances where you have wars just to reduce the flood impact and stuff like that. I remember, I think it was in 2012 or so, when there was massive flooding across the country, there were places where government planned to build makeshift houses or emergency houses, so that every year when flooding comes, people can go there. If you go to Akoko-Edo and all of those places still exist, but those places were never completed. So even when the flooding and erosion comes, there's no place to run to. So that, places them at a disadvantaged position where they can be exposed to epidemics, diseases, right, like cholera and the rest of them.
How does climate change contribute to migration? Does it force people to leave their immediate environments?
Of course it does. It does, because if you, let's take the case of herders. You know that this is where you do your grazing.
Yeah.
And at specific times of the year, you know that when you go to this place, you're going to find water, you're going to find grasses.
Yeah.
And so you graze there comfortably. But here you are, in this place that you're used to, you don't find water, you don't find grasses. In most cases, even where you find the water is in small quantities. Okay. And that even becomes a source of conflict between different parties who have cows to graze in that area. Where the water is not available, the grass is not available, you must always move. They will move to where they will find such facilities to keep their cows alive, keep their business going. So what you have is migration. And as I said before, with migration, you have all kinds of challenges, social issues, crime and criminality, kidnappings, banditry, and all kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay, let's look at carbon emissions. What practical steps can the government take to reduce it?
Plant more trees. Plant more trees. Make it a policy thrust. I think is I think Igbenedion University Okada, I reported it in Environment Watch last week, had observed one of the international days, and what the guest speaker advocated is on the need to plant trees. I think the Vice Chancellor of the University of Benin, my very good friend, Professor Doba Omoyege, is also going to launch a tree planting campaign. So we need to make this a culture because, as I said, trees absorb carbon dioxide as part of the ingredient necessary for photosynthesis to take place.
Okay.
And after photosynthesis, you have carbon sink coming in. In other words, the tree absorbs the carbon.
Okay.
The seeds also act as carbon sink. So basically, if we have more trees, we have more carbon sink. That way, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will be drastically reduced.
Okay.
And then the challenge of global warming will be reduced, and of course, climate change will be drastically reduced.
Okay, now on a final note, beyond tree planting, what more efforts can individuals make to reduce the effect of global warming?
Embrace renewable energy and avoid practices that will complicate the issue of environmental pollution, especially air pollution. If you look at air pollution, water pollution, you know, for our spiritual life, you are told to fast.
Yeah.
When you fast, you don't eat, you don't drink water. You can actually stay for about 7 days, in the extreme, maybe 10 days, without food or water, and you'll be healthy. In fact, you're even healthier when you fast, right?
Yeah.
But you can't stay for that long, you know, without air, right? Maybe 3 minutes, the person is gone. Now you see the impact of COVID-19. The virus wasn't created to spread through water. It was created to spread through the air.
Yeah.
And so it had a very, very global impact, instantaneous impact. When somebody sneezes, the other person, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That tells you how important air is. So we have a responsibility collectively to make our airs cleaner by the action that we take, by the inaction that we take. Because if we want to have a safer, cleaner environment to live in, we must adopt best practices as individuals, as corporate organizations. I remember some time ago, I was doing Environment Watch. I invited some guests to the program. We're doing the program live then. When we're through, Professor Gideon Emelwe is a professor of agriculture from, you know, University of Benin. He was one of my guests. He said, look, Sonny Duke, let's not just theorize this whole discussion that we're having on tree planting. Let's practicalize it. I said, wow. He said, so I brought some trees. While I was coming for this discussion, I brought some trees for us to plant. So they took me to just by the fence.
Okay.
If you get to by the fence on this side of the compound, the big trees that you have there, we planted them.
Wow.
Inside the compound. So one day he called me and said, the trees that we planted, have you been there to check them? I've even forgotten. And I got and scored those trees, they've grown and they're so big and so much. So this is the culture that we must have to keep our environment clean and make it healthier.
All right, Dr. Sonny Duke, I want to say a very big thank you. It's been such a delight having you on the show today. I personally have learned a whole lot from what you've said. And I'm very sure there are so many persons out there that have, you know, picked a thing or two from the amazing insights that you've shared on the show today. Once again, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, it's been Flipside on Independent Television, and of course, it's been such an amazing time on the show today. Whether you like it or not, the environment is part and parcel of us as humans, because you cannot live without your environment. So it's very important that you take very good care of it. That way, we are assured of long life and good health. Well, my name is Harry Aigbo J, and it's been such a pleasure doing this with you. Let's do this again, same time, same station next week. But in the meantime, do the right thing, stay out of trouble, and bye for now.